So today we're going to be looking at this AnkerMake M5C. Thanks to AnkerMake for sponsoring this video and sending this machine over for a review. And let's just get into the details and see what this printer's all about. Hello and welcome to another episode of Nathan Builds Robots. Today I'm going to be looking at the AnkerMake M5C. Now this isn't AnkerMake's first 3D printer, it's actually their second one. The first printer they made is called the M5, and this just adds a little C to the end. And I assume that means the cheap edition because they've left out some parts here, but we'll see if that actually affects the usability of the machine. Now AnkerMake is a division of the Anker company, which makes USB-C power banks, charging cables, cell phone accessories, and all sorts of stuff. I'm a big fan of their work. In fact, I use a little USB-C charger from them. This is an awesome little product that can charge 65 watts in a tiny little package like this. I mean, it just can fit in your pocket. And I also use the 737 power bank by Anker, which can supply 140 watts of USB-C power. So I can charge up my laptop or my phone incredibly fast with this, and it's got capacity to last an entire day. So when I do live coverage of events, I'll plug this into my camera and be able to run it for 8+ hours, which is just crazy. So I really like the products that Anker has brought to market, and I'm curious to see what their 3D printers are like. Now, as you can see, based on these two products, they kind of have a design language that has been carried over to their 3D printers. And that's these kind of gently rounded corners and grayish dark colors. Also, everything that I have from Anker is incredibly well constructed, which is a really interesting skill set to bring to 3D printing because one of the common complaints with most 3D printer brands is that they're lacking in build quality. Well, Anker have proven themselves to be professionals in this area, so let's see if that carries over to their 3D printers. Now, I've already taken most of the stuff out of the box, so we don't need this anymore. Now, the printer comes with this handy instruction poster, which I assume you just like hang up in your office someplace, so let me just put this on the wall here. Alright, now we've got our instructions that we can consult throughout the build. So here's the top half of the machine. It's pretty nicely constructed. Looks like we've got an injection molded plastic top here. That should be nice and sturdy. And then here is an aluminum extrusion that connects the two pillars together. Now something that's kind of interesting here is they're using a different size stepper motor than has been common in the 3D printing area. If you look at virtually any 3D printer on the market, they're using stepper motors that are this size. I mean, if you have any 3D printers laying around, you'll be well familiar with this form factor of stepper motor. But it looks like they're using a slightly smaller stepper motor here, just because on the Z-axis you actually don't need that much power. You've usually got a really high gear ratio on those Z-axis drivers. So the stepper motors don't have to be super strong, and using these tiny stepper motors lets them get away with a smaller form factor, and it probably saves a little bit of money too, since it requires less material to build these things. Now it's kind of difficult to see what's going on inside of here, but it looks like we've got a lead screw and then some kind of aluminum plate that's on these guide rails. We're not going to do a full teardown of this thing, but it suffices to say that this has an excellent build quality and feels very sturdy overall. Another thing that's really nice to see are these pins. So you see these locating pins? These pins are going to be used to precisely assemble mechanical components. I think precision machine design is a skill that's kind of lost on a lot of other 3D printer manufacturers. So it's really nice to see those locating features being used here. Add to that, they've implemented a double pin type locating system correctly. You use one pin and then a slot on the other side. Because if you use two pins in two holes, then those two holes are going to be fighting for the X and Y position. It'll kind of force something to give a little bit. It's just a matter of not over-constraining things because that'll add unnecessary stress and it'll actually reduce the amount of precision that you have. So thanks to those pin and locating features, every time you put this together, it should go together pretty much exactly the same. So really nice to see that. Let's also take a look at the base of the machine here. So it looks like a single large piece of die-cast aluminum. This whole plate is one single component, and this thing on top here, this is what the bed slides back and forth on. This is all kind of one piece of metal. So it's very sturdy, very stiff, and again, it should just be adding to that level of precision that you're getting. These V-groove slots were machined into this chassis, so everything here is really nice, precise, and goes together really well. I mean, this is a level of build quality that I'm not used to seeing in a budget Bedslinger like this. The other thing that you'll notice is that they're using V-groove wheels, which is a little bit unexpected. Personally, I don't have much of a problem with V-groove wheels. The only issue that you might encounter is if they're over-tightened or under-tightened. But with the provided wrench, you should be able to adjust the tightness levels. My wheels came a little bit over-tightened, so I loosened them up with this wrench. And basically all you have to do here is put the wrench on the eccentric nut down here and rotate it until you get the right level of wheel tension. So you want to be able to prevent the wheel from rotating and slide it back and forth without making it too tight. If you make it too tight, you won't be able to stop the wheel from sliding. And if you make it too loose, then there will be some wobble. Basically, you just want it to be just right, not too tight, not too loose. And that's one of the complaints that you can have with these V-groove wheel systems. But, you know, just figure out how to do it. Get it set up once, and you shouldn't really have to adjust it for months or years at a time. People make a big deal about the added maintenance of using V-groove wheels, but personally, I don't really see the issue there. Also, the grooves that these V-groove wheels are sliding in are machined in a single piece, and they have more contact area than the typical aluminum extrusion that is used in these applications. So that means these wheels should be even longer lasting and even lower maintenance than a typical V-groove wheel setup. You can also adjust the belt tension here. The belt tension seems properly adjusted from the factory. I'm not going to have to adjust this at all. But if your belts are too loose or too tight, you can just put an Allen wrench in there and adjust it there. The machine comes with a nice PEI build surface that's double-sided. That should be nice, low maintenance, and easy to use. If we take a look at the bottom side, here's where we can access some of the wiring when we put this thing together. I assume we'll have to use these. There's our power supply under here, and all the electronics are kind of hidden by this plastic cover. So I'm not going to take that apart in this episode, but maybe we'll take a look a little bit later. Drop me a comment if you want to see what's inside of this machine. For now, I'm just going to move forward with the review. You'll also notice that this cast aluminum base is extremely thick. If I get the calipers out, we can measure it. But yeah, this whole thing is built on an 8mm thick plate of aluminum. That's going to be extremely sturdy, and it's even thicker than that here. I think they vary the thickness of this plate based on where it needs to be thick and where it needs to be thin. But it suffices to say that AnkerMake has really overbuilt this thing to make sure it's as precise, stiff, and strong as possible. So that should contribute to an excellent level of build quality. It's extremely apparent just by looking at this thing, but when you even get down to the engineering details, this thing is incredibly well built too. We have a nice wire, we have nice cable management and strain relief here. This is a very well controlled and constrained wire. We're not going to have any issues with this whatsoever. And then in here somewhere is the control PCB. You've also got some vents in the front, so it's probably drawing air in through there and making sure everything's nice and cool. And then you've got 4 rubber feet to make sure that this thing isn't rattling around on your desk too much. But altogether, really nice build quality, and I'm excited to put this thing together. So let's get to it. So it looks like I just take this top half, drop it on here. Those pins really nicely locate everything, and it just kind of snaps together really nicely. So then we'll flip it over, and we're going to install these 8 screws to hold the top and the bottom together. It comes with this nice toolkit, so just keep this with the machine and you'll have all the tools you need to work on it, including a spare nozzle here. These oversized Allen wrenches make installing these fasteners super easy, so just go ahead and put everything together. And once you've got those 8 bolts installed, you're just going to need to plug in those 2 stepper motors. We'll just put this plastic cover back in place, and we've got this nice, smooth, flat bottom where, you've got no exposed wires, and it just goes to show you the attention to detail that Anker have put into this machine. This is just a level of build quality that we're really not used to seeing. And with this thing flipped right side up and set on my table, which is pretty flat, you can see there's no wobble on this machine at all. All 4 feet are making contact with the ground because they've actually built this thing properly, and those 4 points make a plane. I know it sounds kind of silly to talk about it, but you can't take that for granted when you're dealing with budget 3D printers. This thing is incredibly well built for the price, which we'll talk about towards the end of the video. There's a little bit more wiring that we need to take care of. We're just going to take this 20-pin cable, and plug it in just like that. And that should facilitate all the electrical connections. And I think that's it in terms of electrical assembly. We've only got 4 more screws left in this entire kit, and these will be used to attach the spool holder up top. Alright, nice and sturdy. And this Bowden tube gets connected up here. And I feel like this machine needs to win some kind of award for best cable management. I feel like the cable management on here is excellent. No matter where the various components are, the cables don't seem overstressed and they're staying out of the way of important components. So Anker have done a really good job with their cable management. Which isn't surprising because Anker makes some of the best cables on the market. I'm powering my camera right now using an Anker cable. They're bringing their expertise to the 3D printing arena, and I really appreciate that. Now that this thing is put together, let's take a look at the overall build and the user interface and see if there's any conclusions we can draw about this machine before we turn it on. And wait a minute, something's missing here. Is this the only user interface? It's just got one button for the entire thing? That's an extremely odd choice. I guess it saves some money, and if you're using a computer or a cell phone app to control the machine, then you should be able to get by. We'll have to see how this works out in practice, because just one button, I mean, that's extremely simplistic. I guess it's kind of on brand for Anker because all of their other products that I have only have a single button as well. Like this power bank, it's just got one button. This doesn't have any buttons. Then I have another wireless charging power bank that I use for my phone that also only has a single button. So this seems to be kind of Anker's design language, is oversimplify everything to the point where it's just one button to do everything. So we'll see how it works out. I generally am a fan of having a touch screen, and if you get the Anker M5, which is their higher end model, that has a touch screen, a larger print bed, and some other features that you might like. But this being the M5C, it'll be an experience trying to figure out how to use this thing. Alright, let's take a quick look at the print head here. It's also running on V-groove wheels, and they were over-tightened from the factory, so I had to loosen up the adjustment nut down here. You can just stick the wrench down there and loosen it up a little bit. But I got it to the point where I can force these wheels to slide if I need to, and I think they're at the right level of tension now. Keep in mind these V-groove wheels that they're using feel a little bit softer than wheels that I've used from other manufacturers, so you might want to dial back the tension even a little bit more than you're used to. But overall this slides very smoothly and evenly. I can't really see much inside the actual print head, but it looks like it's got dual part cooling fans, and obviously it needs a hot end cooling fan in there somewhere, and it's got a direct drive extruder. This Bowden tube feeds the filament in through the top, and it's got some internal drive gears there. It looks like we've got some LGX sized drive gears for feeding that filament, and according to the spec sheet this has an all metal hot end. So pretty nice features for a budget machine like this. I think the hot end and extruder is something that needs to be really bulletproof in order to have a reliable printer, and I hope they've done a good job here because that's going to make a big difference to the user experience. If we take a look at the spare nozzle that's included in the kit, it looks like it's a slightly longer than standard nozzle, but it's not quite as long as a volcano nozzle. So you should have slightly better flow rates than a typical Bedslinger like an Ender 3, but you won't get super high flow rates. But it should be fast enough for most purposes though. And right here we have a little filament tensioning lever that basically lets you release the tension on the extruder arm. And it's got an interesting mechanism built into it where it's kind of hard to push in, but then it gets easier to press. So they've done some kind of mechanical trickery just to make this user experience a little nicer and more convenient. And it just feels premium because when you're holding the filament back, you're not fighting a lot of spring tension, and when you let go, it clamps down with a decent amount of force. Also, through these grates, I can kind of see a little hint of a breakout board in there. We might take this apart in another video. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that, but for now I'm going to get on with the review and just kind of go over what it's like to use this machine. Interestingly enough, this left-hand pod on the machine seems to have some smarts built into it. It looks like we've got a Wi-Fi antenna or some kind of status indicator light up here, and we've got a little indicator light for the M logo, which will probably tell you some status about the machine. If we look on this side, it looks like there's a little spot where I can pry on this, so let's just pull that off and we'll take a peek in here before we get started. So it looks like we've got a breakout board in here. That tensioning screw looks like it's for adjusting the tightness of the belt for the X-axis. and it does feel a little tight. I don't think it's tight enough to cause any issues, so we'll leave it alone. But yeah, that's your X-axis tension adjustment screw. And it looks like the plastic was kind of clamping down on this wire a little bit. This wire needs to go to its home, which is safely inside of this little area there. Just get that tucked away. But overall, it's a pretty interesting little PCB they've got there. There's some kind of smarts on there, it looks like. Something that's really interesting here is that there's no stepper motor in this side of the machine, so there must be some stepper motor wires running inside of this aluminum extrusion over to the other end. Alright, well, I know not everybody's interested in all these nerdy little details, but if you like them and you want to see more, make sure to subscribe to my channel and we might take a look at this stuff later. Oh wow, and they've done some interesting work with the light pipes in here. Really interesting stuff. I mean, Anker definitely put some effort into this design. But let's just snap this back on, and we can always take a look at this later. On the left-hand side, you can see a little USB-C port and a little reset button that you can press with a pen or something. You really gotta reach in there to push that button. So that's like a last resort reset switch in case the machine is erroring out or something. But other than that, I think everything here looks good. I'm just going to flip the switch on the back and turn this thing on. Then we get to the real challenge, which is figuring out how to use a machine that has no user interface. I mean, we've just got this button here. I assume that I'm going to have to do most things through the phone app, but we'll see how it works. We'll give it a fair shake. And I guess it's really on brand for Anker. I mean, they're known for making phone accessories, so maybe this is one giant phone accessory. And that's the way they were able to pitch this to their executives. In any case, let's get this thing fired up and see what happens. Alright, we got a little bit of power supply fan noise. I guess it's quiet enough. Oh my! I just realized I can pop this other side open, so let's take a look at that before we really get started here. Alright, and yeah, basically this is just a stepper motor. Nothing fancy going on this side. And then we've got the little wire coming in through the other side. And it's kind of difficult to see in there, but the wire for that stepper motor actually goes into the aluminum extrusion itself. And I don't think the connector for that stepper motor would be able to fit through there. So I think they actually fished that wire through and then put the connector on it and plugged it in. I've never needed to replace the stepper motor on a 3D printer, so should be fine. Then this pulley gear looks like it's a press fit pulley gear. Again, it's probably something that you'll never need to replace. Now, mandatory disclosure time, AnkerMake did provide this machine to me free of charge, and money did exchange hands, so they're paying me for this review. However, I won't let that get in the way of my objectivity on whether or not this is a quality machine. So we'll load our Anker filament up top here, and feed it into the Bowden tube. I guess it's just a PTFE tube. It's not really a Bowden tube since it's not part of the drivetrain. So we just feed the filament in through the top, pull this lever, and push it in a little bit further. And now that filament has been loaded into the machine. We can see our status light over there has turned green. I don't know if there's a preloaded job on this machine I can start up. I'm going to see what happens if I just press the start button. Okay, looks like I'm going to have to install an app or a computer thing, so stand by while I figure that out. What I'm going to do here is show you what the easy print mode is like. Now this is kind of weird, like I'm used to using a slicer to get everything going, but what you can do here is just tap on any of these models and hit print, and print it on this right there, hit continue, and it just goes ahead and gets started with the print job. So it says the print will automatically start after it finishes downloading, and there you go, the print is already underway, and it's heating up the build surface and the nozzle, and it's just going to automatically get going here. So that's where this machine really shines, is that fully automated workflow. And it's what makes it recommendable to someone who doesn't know how to use a 3D printer. There's no messing around with slicers. You just find the model that you want to print using their Discovery Exploration tab. Hopefully this is going to get built out so that there's just going to be a bunch of stuff that you can just be like, oh, I want an articulated shark or something. You can just tap it and have one be printed out. So let's say I wanted the shark. I'll just tap that and it gets started. It's going to do a fully automated purge and leveling procedure, and then it's just going to get started without having to know how the printer works. It just does the whole thing by itself. And we'll just watch it do its thing. This machine just takes care of itself for the most part, and that's the coolest thing about it. Alright, so we just finished up the Speed Benchy. I'm going to take it off. Let's just start up a new print here. I have some sliced models on this flash drive, which I can plug in on the side here. So if I plug that in, I can go into my printer. If I hit print, I can look on my USB drive. There's all my G-code files that I sliced, some using Prusa slicer and some using the AnkerMake app. Oops. Now this isn't really a machine for the modders, and you're best off just leaving it in its stock configuration. It can print super fast, it's got really good part cooling, it's got a nice extruder and hot end setup, it's got good bed leveling, so there's really not much you need to change on this machine to get good results. Here's some stuff that I printed on it, just stock. There's really nothing to complain about here with the print quality. I think one of the most important features on this machine is that you're able to print stuff out without having to learn how to use a slicer. And this is what I mean by that. You can go to this Explore tab, and then there's a bunch of models here that you can select. So from this menu you can pick out any number of objects you want to print. A lot of these should look familiar because I've printed a ton of these out just using this app interface. So you find something you want to print, you tap on it, and you say print. And as long as your printer is connected to the internet, it'll be able to download that G-code to the machine and run it. And it basically requires no user knowledge or experience. All you have to do is tap the button and then you get the object out in the amount of time that it takes to print. And this thing's fast. It's able to print something like this. This was a longer print. This took maybe 6 hours. But they've got a Benchy on here that you can print out in 20 minutes. So very speedy machine. And overall, I really like what they've done with the app here. It's set itself up as kind of like a 3D printer and model sharing platform. So instead of having to get your 3D printer, then learn how to use a slicer and find your models using all these different pieces of software, it's all integrated into the app, so you can just see what you want to print, tap it, and the part pops out. I know a lot of people in the audience use their printer to print out parts and toys for their kids. This is a really cool interface because you can teach your kids how to use this printer, and then if they want to print something off of these pre-prepared models, all they have to do is tap the button and get the print started. And I think that's a much more user-friendly experience, especially towards people who aren't like super technical and knowledgeable on how to use a 3D printer. Now you can always go into their slicer and slice files manually and put them on the SD card or beam them over Wi-Fi onto the machine and get your print started that way. But I think this is the real game changer, having the app where you can just see what you want to print, tap the button, and get your parts out in the end. And for that reason, I think this is the perfect printer to recommend for someone who you wouldn't normally recommend to get a 3D printer, because they're going to have a really easy time with it. The setup is super simple. Once you pair it to the app, which is again really easy thanks to the QR codes on the back and the step-by-step walkthroughs, you'll be able to get up and running in no time. And the hardware on this thing is just immaculate. It's a very good example of what a 3D printer needs to be. There's no obvious weak points. I guess the only thing that you could complain about is that it's not enclosed, but if you're printing things out in PLA or PETG, it really is not an issue at all. I did have a few issues running prints that were sliced in Prusa Slicer, so I'm not sure if the compatibility is completely there yet. Anything that I did using AnkerMake's own slicer executed fine. It's just when you go over to Prusa Slicer and you want to use your old workflows, then you might have a little bit of compatibility issues. Now, you have all these great pre-sliced models, but you can also slice your own models. All you have to do is press the play button to start up the last model that was added to the printer, or double press the play button to fire up the last model that was printed. So you have some really interesting options there. But if you want to do anything more advanced, let's say you've got like a couple hundred models on here and you want to pick a specific one, you can click this print button on the app, and this will pull up all of the files that you have on your SD card. The other really good use case for this printer would be mass production of PLA or PETG parts, since you can just double press the button and keep printing the same object over and over again. You don't really need that much of an interface. You just set up the print farm, get these things running, and leave it alone. And thanks to the reliability of this machine, you're not going to have to spend too much time worrying about it. I like that this machine is nice and quiet. Alright, so I'm going to do my usual sound test. I'm standing an arm's length away from the machine, and we'll see what kind of decibels we have while it's printing this first layer. 42 decibels is exceptionally quiet. Of course, it'll be a little bit louder when it turns that part cooling fan on. But let's take a closer look at the first layer quality while it lays this down. Also, I'm going to put the microphone up next to this thing just to hear it, because it just sounds fun. Makes a lot of cute little noises. So as you can see, this thing is laying down an absolutely gorgeous first layer. I'm going to make use of this pause button and just pause the print so we can take a look at it. So yeah, I mean, these are really good first layers. You're not going to have any problems with bed adhesion here. And I really put this thing through a lot of stress testing by printing out so many articulated models, and they all came out just fine. So yeah, that brings us to the other points of this interface. You can pause the print, and that will give you time to like change the color out if you want to, or you can press and hold to stop the print. So yeah, I mean, really simple interface. It does what you need it to do, and it gets the job done. Alright, so final thoughts on this machine. It's just a no-nonsense, well-built machine. If you want to spend less time messing with your printer and more time printing, then I could highly recommend one of these. It should be good for any type of mass production environment because of how reliable the machine is. And I think what they're doing with the app is really awesome. Being able to print stuff out just by touching the picture of the thing that you want to print, I think that's going to make 3D printing accessible to many more people. Not everyone wants to figure out how to use a slicer and tune their printer. And it just brings 3D printing to a lot more people that want to enjoy it. But yeah, that's all I have to say about this printer. I think this is a really good printer to have on the market because it helps fill a niche that not many other 3D printers are filling right now. Most printers are highly technical, kind of finicky, and require a lot of tuning and learning in order to get going. This one is basically you plug it in, download the app, and press some buttons and figure out what you want to print and get printing. So as always, thanks for watching this video. Remember to like and subscribe, and if you're thinking about picking one of these up, make sure to click my affiliate link in the description down below. Alright, I'll see you in the next episode.